Hey guys, good to have you guys here at really short notice. So we are going to talk about the autopsy, but not the way that we already have, because I have dealt with it. We're going to go through it based on looking at what another pretty big channel said about it. They kind of had, I guess, experts on, and we just want to look at how rational that expertise is in basically disputing the autopsy results. And they may say, hey, it's not denial, it's just being very selective about the reality I accept. Well, you can call it denial or you can call it that. Anyway, we're going to examine that. And it's not just one thing, we're going to go through about 5 things that are somewhat valid and around about 5 that are not valid. I don't really have time to exhaustively go through everything, but I think I did touch on the most important points. You guys may want to contribute your own criticism, but you may also want to contribute yes, buts, and that's fine. I'm sure I didn't watch everything that there was to watch. There's also another very big channel that's former LE that's going on, I think, in an hour or so. I also need to get off in order to do Van Gogh letters number 31. So I've got to be quite quick to get through this. But there's another channel that's also going to be looking at the autopsy. I imagine they're going to dispute it as well. So I'm also going to be looking at that. It's okay to dispute it, but what are your merits and what's your expertise? And then also, if you dispute it, well, then you've got to have a theory for what did happen. So if you say, that doesn't look right and that looks unprofessional and I'm not sure about that and there are questions regarding that, fine. But then replace that, synthesize that with something else. You don't just criticize it. You need to have an alternative explanation. So you might say, I don't really accept this autopsy report. If I could have my way, this is what I would say. Well, what would that be then? And why would you say that? Or what do you see in the autopsy that is taking you in a certain direction? You can't just say, well, let's debunk the entire autopsy. What new information comes out of that that can take you in a particular direction? Isn't there any information in that report that supports your theory, right? So that's really where we are coming from. Okay, I think I'm going to just bring up a couple of other images. So let's just do that. And good to see SM Kowalinski here, Sharon Conroy, Perfect Imperfection, Kathy Richardson, Bria, good to see you, Helena, Poos Blustery Day, Zircon, Get in Sweden, Yvonne Phillips, I think he's standing by for the members only thing. But anyway, let's get going with this. So is the criticism of the autopsy report fair, or is there a lot of denial going on? So make sure you vote. Let's have a look at the poll right now at the moment. Right now, the question is, are most channels in denial? 65%, 2/3 say yes. So that's quite a lot of you, but let's see where we end up with that poll. So make sure you vote in that poll. Oh, it's gone down to 64. Let's see where the poll ends by the end of the session. Quite a significant amount of you, 20%, that's a fifth, are saying, I'm still deciding, I'm actually still trying to make up my mind, right? But let me do another poll sort of on this channel, like during this live, based on what do you think? Do you think the criticism of the autopsy report is fair? So do you think it should be criticized? What do you say to that? So if you think it should be criticized, put a 1. And if you think it shouldn't be criticized, that the entire report is basically fine, you can put a 2. That's quite interesting. Someone says, I think many are continuing to use it for content, not real denial. Elizabeth Jones says, how can a 16-year-old's lungs weigh less than a 4-year-old girl's? Okay. Okay, so I see a lot of ones and one or two twos. Green Eye says, I know pathology, everything about the body, been studying it for 16 years. She should have more water in her lungs. I'm sorry, it's not a dry drowning. So if you say she didn't drown, then what's your explanation? What's your explanation? If she didn't drown, what's your explanation? Don't say foul play. If you say, well, she didn't drown, well, then do you also not accept the fire cam footage? If you do accept the fire cam footage, what's your explanation? Yvonne says, I think some things are unexplained things. So Koi Cat says, I'm confused by the weight of the lungs. 110 do not sound heavy. Okay. Okay. So I don't really want to go into that area, but what I can say is, you know, you can have another situation taking place, such as a heart attack, although I'm sure that would have then come up in the autopsy, where you are anticipating drowning, you are panicking, you have a heart attack, and then you don't breathe. But then you would imagine that would that death would not be due to drowning; it would be due to cardiac, what do they call it? Myocardial infarction, right? But that is a way that you would not have water in the lungs. Another possibility is that you absolutely try not to breathe and then you pass out. So if you have followed, there's a movie right now on Netflix, and then there's another one, there's another documentary out, I think it's called No Limit, where these guys and men and women dive very deep down, you know, it's free diving. And sometimes on the way up, they pass out because they don't take a breath of water, right? They pass out because they just do not want to inhale. You might say it's an involuntary response, but you can also pass out. So just worth thinking about. I don't really want to go into that area because there are other areas that we do know about that we can talk about. So that's what I want to do. So it was actually through word of mouth that someone informed me that X channel, in her words, tore the autopsy to shreds. Can I be honest? One thing that surprised me the most in this case, one of the things that surprised me the most was former law enforcement dudes criticizing their own colleagues, while at the same time praising YouTube and social media. I saw it once, I sort of did a double take, thought perhaps I was hallucinating, and then I saw it again on a different channel. And I suppose the reality is, if you former law enforcement but currently a YouTuber, in reality, your colleagues are YouTubers, not law enforcement. And then why wouldn't you align yourself with YouTubers, especially big YouTubers? But then if you do that, what does that say about your expertise? If you're deferring to other YouTubers, who knows what their qualifications are, maybe they're truck drivers or whatever it is, what does that say about your expertise if you're not sort of aligned with, I don't know, law enforcement or just some sort of expertise? If you prepare to abandon your expertise, when a big channel comes along, what does that say about your expertise? You could say that that didn't happen. But I think you've got to acknowledge that this was a very strange case where most of the true crime community threw themselves in with one particular team. And then the result that came out at the other end wasn't what that team thought it was. And that's now kind of a bit embarrassing. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I guess if you say that it didn't happen, that it's wrong, then you don't need to be embarrassed. You don't need to do a mea culpa. If you're in denial, you don't need to apologize for anything because you were right all along. We're going to talk about signs that you're in denial as well, but the question I'm trying to ask here is, what is going on here say about expertise? What does it say about not having a foot in the race? What does it say about bias? Does it say anything? On YouTube, there's always a double bias. If you get on the right side of the narrative, you'll be popular, and not just that, you'll be rewarded, financially rewarded. So there's an incentive. So it makes sense to be on the right side of a narrative. Now, that's fine if you're doing celebrity gossip or you're doing, I don't know, whatever other people do on YouTube. But if you're in true crime, being on the right side of the narrative, is that true crime, or is that, what's the word? Tell them what they want crime. There's a difference between that. So it does make sense to be on the right side of the narrative if you're on YouTube. The right side means the popular side. Even if you're actually wrong, you want to be on the right side so that you can make money. That's the reality of true crime right now, unfortunately, but it's not reality. It's the reality of true crime, but it's not reality. In other words, true crime isn't reality anymore. That's the reality of human nature, and human psychology. Where's that picture? And it's tabloid sensation online isn't reality. In fact, it usually isn't even close. And that's another thing I've been pondering privately. How qualified are the most qualified voices that I'm seeing in true crime, including the bigger channels in investigating a case like this? How qualified are some of these channels, given that there are subtleties in this case, and there were in this case in terms of the landscape? Where's that? There were subtleties in terms of the landscape. There were subtleties in terms of the map and where the party actually was, right? And so the question is, there were twists and turns. Yes, there were, but this was also a relatively simple case. So again, you ask, how qualified are they? And you could ask me the same thing, and by all means, you should, and you can. I don't do much of a song and dance about my own qualifications. I think when I say I've written 100 books, people are either scoff at that and go, yeah, yeah, so the 100 books means actually absolutely nothing. But is there another creator you know that's written 10 books or 20 books or 30 books? So I could do that, but I don't. I would if I thought it mattered. If I thought it mattered, I would introduce every episode by, talking about all the books that I've written. I could also say I've studied at university for 10 years. I could say that, which is longer than most doctors or lawyers study. And you do get some knowledge out of being at university, studying in a multidisciplinary field. You do get some valuable knowledge from that. In the same way you get knowledge writing one after another true crime book, where you look at autopsies, for example, in every case, in a lot of detail, and then you compare one to the other. You get a lot of insight from that. That's another intertextual element. Autopsy, intertextuality, right? So yeah, I could go into detail about my CV, but I don't, as I say, not because I think it matters, but because I think it doesn't really matter. In current true crime, it doesn't matter. I wish it did. Facts should matter, and experts should be qualified in the current true crime milieu. But people care what they believe, and that's why very few are qualified in this field. And if you look at the channel that dominated this case, and you say, well, what are their actual qualifications as investigators? No, it doesn't matter. That really doesn't matter. That's reality. That's the reality. So if you think about it, all that matters is that you key into what the algorithm believes. It's not truth. It's using your reptilian brain. I'm talking about as a creator. You don't have to know what the truth is. You've just got to follow the algorithm. What is the algorithm saying? What is it rewarding? Follow your reptilian brain, follow your greed, follow and expand on these paths of the psychological paths of least resistance. As I say, that's not true crime. That's a kind of psychology. You could even say predatory psychology. Now, coming back to law enforcement scoffing at other law enforcement, that's what it feels like to me. I want to share a few observations I made about a recent video from a channel that's a lot bigger than my own and one that often seems to have experts on it. Now, this channel, as an introduction to analyzing the autopsy report, played a clip from Law and Crime, right? Now, I think you know what I'm getting at when I say this. So the channel that was the first go-to channel for AWP, this channel, in other words, the channel that launched the suspicious theory, this other channel uses that to address the question of the autopsy and basically, again, cast suspicion on the autopsy. In other words, there's a sense that they borrow strength from the criticism of a very big channel, but also a channel that made exactly the same, in my opinion, mistake, which is it's all suspicious. It's incredibly suspicious, everything that's going on. And if one person says it and everyone repeats it, well, then it becomes reality. Not if you think about it, not if you think about alternatives. But I just think it's interesting that they brought this other channel into their story. And this is the part that's really quite weird. The expert on Law and Crime hadn't even read the full autopsy report, and then he's now dictating the narrative. It's like, we're going to introduce the narrative with an expert that hasn't even read the autopsy but knows a little bit about it. And he admitted this. The expert admitted that he hadn't read it, but then he's still held up as the expert. So, why? Because he's saying the same thing we want to say. Anyway, this channel that I referenced also highlighted the possibility of there being a second autopsy. So they're already saying, even before they've gone into the autopsy, they're framing the narrative. They're saying, before we even look at the autopsy, you know what? Could there be a second autopsy? Could we get a second opinion? Right? Because we disagree with this opinion. Before we even talk about that opinion, let's get a second opinion. Oh, but we can't because the remains have been cremated. That's the argument. But get into the actual autopsy before you already dismiss it and undermine it, and you're undermining the authorities at the same time. Anyway, let me continue. So it was also brought up there, have you ever seen anyone asking for a second autopsy and where the initial results were overruled? Well, I've seen that. I've gone through that in my true crime investigations. I covered this question in the past. It does happen. In the Nora Corrin, but now look at why it happens and what happens when you do that. So in the Nora Corrin case, and I wrote a book about that, the original autopsy showed that the 15-year-old French-Irish teenager had gotten lost in the Malaysian jungle and starved to death. That was the assessment of the original autopsy, that a teenager had walked into the jungle, gotten lost, and literally died of starvation. What a horrible ending for this young lady. But the parents didn't like that result. Predictably, the parents didn't like that to be in the news headlines. Our daughter starved to death a mile or two from the resort. She got lost and died in that way. So they insisted on a second autopsy, and they got the result that they wanted. And you can have the same thing, and you see the same thing in courtrooms all the time. Get another expert, get another opinion. Well, get another one until you get the right opinion. You may go to a doctor, and the doctor may say, you've got this or that. Well, you can go to any amount of doctors until a doctor tells you exactly what you want to hear. It's the same with an autopsy that you don't agree with. You can go to a pathologist to get the answer that you want. And so that is what happened in the Nora Corrin case, right? But is that fair? Is it fair to sort of go, you know what, I don't even want to think about that, let's get a second opinion? Isn't that denial? So if you just divorce yourself from Kylie Rodney and you think about this other case where this teenager apparently starved to death, can you see why the parents wouldn't want that to be the end, the conclusion of that story, that they would want another epilogue? They would feel like, I want this story to end a different way. So as I said, they insisted on a second autopsy. They got the result that I think they wanted, which was that foul play couldn't be ruled out, right? Which meant, in other words, they couldn't say that there wasn't foul play, which meant it could theoretically be ruled in. There wasn't any evidence to show that it could be ruled in, but it's kind of playing with the sort of vagary of everything. And I would imagine social media would like to do that here, is let's have a second autopsy, and then, well, if you can't rule out foul play, I guess, then I guess you can rule it in, or something like that. I don't know. I'm not sure what they would want to focus on. But I think that's a question worth asking, is what is the ideal autopsy result that you're looking for? Like, this is not what you wanted to hear. What did you want to hear? Did you want to hear that Kylie was strapped in the back? Well, then why didn't you hear that? Did you want to see evidence of blunt force trauma? Well, why didn't you see that? Did you want to see SA? Well, why didn't you see that? All those things, right? May says, we still have questions, but need we attack while we ask and hopefully learn? I'm not sure you're referring to there. Who's attacking who? I'm attacking the, what do you call it? The lack of critical thinking. I'm attacking the approach to the autopsy report, not attacking anyone in particular. Otherwise, I would say their name, or I would make slurs. I'm attacking the merits of the argument. So if you imagine we're sitting in a courtroom and one side is arguing that the autopsy is ridiculous, then I'm on the other side saying, actually, a lot of it makes sense. In other words, it's a legal argument. It's not a personal argument. Do you see what I'm saying? And it happens all the time in court that one side will say, well, what is the other side's credentials, right? That is another legal question, credentials. And you can argue that the credentials of the truckee community, you can argue about that. That is one argument. But I think you can also argue about your own credentials. You can also argue about, it's one thing to criticize and say, that doesn't look or sound right to me, but what about what does? What about the other side to that? Okay. Someone is saying someone's so corrupt. I'm not going to tolerate that. That's just really defamatory, making claims like that. Okay, let me continue. So in the Nora Corrin case, they preferred, just think about this, they seem to prefer the idea that a stranger had abducted or kidnapped or something else had happened to their daughter, rather than that she had simply gotten lost. If she had simply gotten lost, that would be pretty embarrassing. Now think about that word in the context of this case. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to be humiliated. Well, then let's just change the outcome. Let's get a different report. Now, I think humiliation also seems to be the thing fake crime seems to be trying to avoid. In the Rebecca Zahau case, Rebecca's body was exhumed. Did you guys know this? Her body was exhumed in order to disprove that she had died in the way that law enforcement said she had died. This is another version of an autopsy that sort of superseded. And law enforcement had said there's no foul play, she was not murdered. And sure enough, her body was exhumed, and the pathologist found a reason I believe to be true, that Zahau had been murdered. It was the damage to the hyoid bone, right? or the state, let me put it this way, the state of the hyoid bone. And now I've written 2 books about that case, the Zahau case. Even so, despite another pathologist finding something else, despite a lot of activism, despite a lot of protest, despite a lot of evidence, Ali didn't change their finding. I think there was a civil case which I think was lost by the, anyway, let me just move on. But anyway, that is a very different case to this one. You had billionaires, you had very rich people, you had quite a lot of intrigue. There's a little boy who fell and died during all of that. So there were fairly obvious signs of potentially suspicious activity, right? There's quite a lot of intrigue going on, right? Now, if you compare that to the Rodney case, it's chalk and cheese. The only possible indication that there could be foul play in the Rodney case, given what we know now, is the idea that Kylie was somehow manipulated with a drug. She somehow did something against her will, or was she was sort of manipulated against her will, right? That's really the only way you can still bring in the foul play narrative. I'm just looking at some of your comments. So Green Eye says, I really think she could have OD'd. Well, if she drowned, it's not because she OD'd, unless she OD'd while she was drowning, or while she was, yeah. You know, in the John Benet Ramsey case, you actually have a dual cause of death. You have head trauma and asphyxia. They go hand in hand. You could actually have something like that here. You could have someone potentially ODing while they're drowning, I guess. I suppose that's possible. I don't like these arguments because of the things that we do know and the things that have been disputed all along. So let's go to those things. So there's this idea that she may have been somehow manipulated with a drug and taken advantage of with the intent to harm her while in the company of dozens, if not hundreds of witnesses. But then the fire cam video shows that that's not the case, that Kylie was driving, that the vehicle went into the water exactly when, where, and how we would expect. If you say Kylie wasn't driving, then what is your more realistic explanation for what happened? That someone else was driving? Well, then how did they get from that point away? In other words, they now don't have a means of transport away from a murder scene. Why wouldn't they dispose of Kylie and take her car and go somewhere else? Why would you rob yourself of a getaway vehicle given that situation? Why would you commit a crime and then have to run home on foot? It doesn't really make any sense. But if you want to insist on that being your theory, the foul play theory has to be true, right? Because if it isn't, you've just discredited yourself and you've got egg on your face. But it could also be a sign that you're in denial. There are a couple of signs that you might be in denial, and we'll go through that in a moment. Of course, there's another way to regain credibility, and that is admit that you made a mistake, or admit that you may have made a mistake. You could also do that. So there's another, as I say, there's another big former Ali channel that is about to expertly review the autopsy results. I think it's taking place in about an hour, if it's not now. But what I want to look at first are a few points that are justified and a few that aren't. This is from another former Ali channel, right? if you guys want to read the full 18-page autopsy report, I have posted it at this link. You guys can have a look at that, right? And Deborah says, I read through the autopsy on Kylie and I can't see what people aren't happy with. The important thing is the family are happy and getting on with their lives. Morning Dove says, I don't think it's denial for a death. It's denial that so much corruption can be surrounded by the case and go unanswered. Not quite sure what that means. Okay. So Kai Cat says, even if she didn't drown, internal and external fluids would have achieved some kind of equilibrium. So what I think a lot of people aren't acknowledging here is that her remains were submerged for 16 days, 2 weeks and a couple of days, right? And they could easily have said that it's inconclusive. They could have said, we can't say for sure what has happened. And that maybe that would have been a better answer, but that would have just fed the social media machine. Oh, inconclusive means that she was murdered. That's what people would have said. In the Elisa Lam case and also the Kanika Jenkins, I wish I had that information in front of me, but I think there's a sense of uncertainty in both those cases about exactly how she got to where she got. In both those cases, there was uncertainty in terms of Elisa Lam. How on earth did she get onto the roof? Because that shouldn't have been possible. So because it shouldn't be possible, it's foul play. Well, it's harder for someone to carry someone up a ladder than for someone to get themselves up a ladder. So that, although that doesn't make any sense, there's a logic failure there. In the Kanika Jenkins case, you don't see footage of Kanika actually going into the refrigerator. So people said, that little gap in the footage where you don't see her going in, that means that she was murdered. But there's another problem. You don't see anyone else in the kitchen either. So although that's true, there's that gap. Well, there's a bigger problem where the footage you do see, you don't see anybody else. So, that's another case I've been meaning to cover. Yeah, so there's always a little gap, and people want to, we think we know everything, and we think we should know everything, and when we don't, we think that must be a sign of the worst thing, murder, death, whatever, the worst possible thing. We don't think, well, it could just be something that we just can't be certain of because the passage of time and the corruption of decomposition clouds reality, and that makes reality hard to see, right? TLR says, the part that bothers me is multiple people said she was falling down drunk. Tox screen proves she wasn't, therefore people lied. Why lie? See, it's that kind of thing that really irritates me. It's making an absolute statement based on misinterpreting the autopsy result. Tox screen proves she wasn't intoxicated. No, it doesn't. So, it's the same thing. It's the same thing as a diver coming out and saying, it's definitely suspicious, as saying, I've looked at the toxicology and she definitely wasn't intoxicated. No, you're not reading it right. You're definitely not reading it right. Anyway, we will get to that. So let's look at this page from the autopsy. I'm going to try and go through this as quickly as I can. Can you guys see that? Let me make myself a bit smaller. And this a bit bigger. Ken Dalton says, there's another door off camera at the freezer where the camera can't be seen and someone could have been standing there. Ken, I think you may be on the wrong channel if you kind of like, let's think of all the foul play conspiracy options and not think of the Occam's razor, the most obvious logical thing, then you're definitely on the wrong channel. Yeah, the family did sue and they lost. So, yeah. Anyway, The point I'm trying to make is in the Elisa Lam case and the Kanika Jenkins case, you had a perfect analogy to this case where you have a limited amount of information. You have the end result and the context in the beginning, and then the part that you can't necessarily explain, you say, oh, she must have been murdered. Because the alternative is just too banal for you. It's just too unexciting. That's how human nature is, but it's not reality. Okay, so let's deal with number one. So I'm going to deal with autopsy criticism that's valid. Okay, let's start with that. So Kylie Rodney clearly did not die. Can you guys see the 0821 2022 and 2033 hours? Kylie Rodney clearly did not die on August 21st at 2033. However, the date that the body was discovered and recovered and confirmed to be deceased is a kind of confirmation for the first time that Kylie had in fact died, right? Now, this channel was basically saying that that is definitely, so in other words, they're going through it, trying to look for problems, trying to look for mistakes. Now, that's true. She didn't die at that time. But the flip side of the story, if you're being honest and if you're being fair, is, well, you don't know when she died, but the pathologist arriving on scene confirms for the first time, this is, I think it's Kylie. We will later confirm that it is her. And I'm now on scene and I'm confirming that she's deceased. And what is the time? That's the time. And that happens a lot in true crime. So they're really arguing with a kind of, it's a kind of a situation. I don't want to say it's semantics, but they're arguing with a detail that is explicated later on in the autopsy itself. So in other words, again, they're framing it as there are lots of problems with this autopsy report, only to go a little bit further into it to find, oh, so I guess that does make sense, right? So let me explain. If you go to this page, it provides the narrative and it says the date reported, time reported. Then, and that's quite interesting that was the time, I guess, that her mother must have phoned it in. Date of death, there it is. Time of death, there it is. And then there, time of death announced, there it is. The date of death and time of death corresponds to the time of death announced. Because at that time, they have just started. They haven't finished their investigation. So this report may be superseded by another one. And it often is. You often have one report will say, based on what we know, it's this. Then the toxicology could supersede that. And also the vehicle telemetry, the California Highway Patrol, their report could supersede both of these. Or it could confirm both of these, right? What does Ken say? Okay. You can't be open to others' opinion as well. So, Ken, you want to believe that Kanika Jenkins was murdered, is that right? And also you want to believe that Kylie Rodney was murdered. So you want me to be open to that? Is that what you're asking? Let me let's stay on that for a second. Do you want to believe that Kanika Jenkins was murdered? And do you want to believe that Kylie Rodney was murdered? I agree with that. Use logic. I know she was. I don't believe Kylie was. You know that already. You know who was. You know that Kanika was murdered. So putting someone in a refrigerator is a really slow way of doing that. Anyway. I know she was. So you say, I know she was, and up here you say, I'm not open to others' opinion, but you're saying I know she was. Sorry, Ken, I'm gonna think you're a nice guy. Normally but you're attacking me on my own channel in a live. Sorry, I'm gonna block you. Bonnie says, also it's common for teens to exaggerate how drunk they are and other kids to assume that people partying with them were also wasted. Eyewitness testimony is unreliable. Yeah. I know that Ken is also a big fanboy of another channel, which is why I'm not that sorry to see him go. I'm not that dumb to not know who's affiliated with who and who's trying to undermine who, really. Wasn't born yesterday. Okay, so obviously Kylie Rodney didn't die August 21st, 2033. But the date, as I say, that the body was discovered and recovered and confirmed to be deceased is a kind of confirmation for the first time that Kylie had in fact died. As I say, you can see it over here. There it says, cause of death pending investigation. Smoker, yes. Alcohol use, yes. Pending forensic pathologist report. So this is the part that irritates me, is someone jumping into the autopsy and basically saying, oh, look, this is an error. This is an error that we found. It is the beginning of the report. And I have this when I write books. At the beginning of writing a book, I don't know what's going to happen by the end of the book that I'm writing. I am investigating, and as I'm investigating, I get more information. So you can't criticize what I didn't know right at the beginning because I didn't know it. And that's the same case over here. They just started the investigation with Kylie. They didn't know what her time of death was, right? Or date of death, although you could say with some certainty now, in retrospect, what that was. So that's the part that's not really fair, is coming in afterwards saying, yeah, well, I know what the outcome is here, so why is that not there? It's also interesting that the number 10 at the bottom of the page appears to be different to the other numbers. That's a reference to this. Can you see over here? The number 10 is sort of, looks like italics, and then that's like that. It just makes me wonder whether this was later updated or changed. It's not like a big thing, but it's certainly something that I noticed. Okay. While the date of Kylie's death is certainly wrong on this document, what's also clear is that we can't be 100% certain when she did die. It's likely that vehicle telematics could confirm that data. It seems strange that the date isn't given as August 6th on the surface of it. On the other hand, I suppose you could argue that this was made in deference to tow truck guy. Are you following? In other words, if law enforcement was saying, we can't be absolutely sure because somebody said that they saw Kylie riding around, you could actually say that this time of death was made for safety's sake because of tow truck guy. In other words, give credit to tow truck guy where it's due. He may actually have influenced the way that the autopsy was written. Could be. So now number 2, the LA channel also complains about numerous discrepancies between height and weight. So as far as I went into trying to figure out how they were criticizing the autopsy report, the first thing was they said, oh no, the time of death is completely wrong. That's the first error. We found that. And then the other thing that's totally wrong, as I say, numerous discrepancies, is, well, her height and weight is totally wrong as well, right? So to me, I guess there are 2 ways of looking at that. The one is you say, so if the height and weight is wrong, was it actually not Kylie Rodney? Like, what are you trying to say? Are you trying to say that the person that they were examining wasn't Kylie Rodney? So where is Kylie Rodney, right? That's the first absurd thing that you draw from that. The second absurd thing you draw from that is you say, so how can I put this? The weight is 103 pounds. Why isn't it 118 pounds, right? So you can criticize it. You can say, why is her weight not 118 pounds? Weight 103 pounds. Why isn't it 118 pounds? So what's your answer to that? Let's put the question into your onto your desk. Why do you think the weight isn't 118 pounds? Why? What possible reason could there be for that? Stephanie, good to see you here. Yeah, where is the tow truck guy now? Shouldn't he be coming forward? He's really, really credible. Shouldn't he be coming forward to say, no, I definitely saw what I saw? Where is he? Where's the footage from the tow truck guy? Yeah, so Zircon says 16 days in water. Now, to be a little bit absurd, imagine someone's buried in a coffin for 1,000 years, and you then dig them up out of the coffin and you look at the remains. What do you expect to find? Do you expect the weight to be the same? If you do, you're an idiot. So what is the discrepancy of the weight supposed to mean? Well, I guess, is it somebody else's remains, or that the autopsy is so shoddy that Ali shouldn't be trusted? So again, it's a criticism that I don't think is valid, to say, well, there's a discrepancy between her weight and the weight of these remains. That means the person who did the autopsy report can't be trusted. Or it is the correct weight because that's what happens when a body's in water for 16 days. You know, when a body is exposed for long enough, there's eventually just a skeleton. Does a skeleton weigh as much as a normal body? Does the skeleton that's turned into dust weigh as much as a normal person? That's what decomposition means. Decomposition means something that existed gets broken down. While it gets broken down, it weighs less. There's decay taking place. Do we really have to look up the word decomposition? It means the first stage in the, okay, that's not really what I'm looking for. It is the process whereby the dead tissues break down and are converted into something else. So there's looks like an apple, right? Where's that? Why doesn't this apple weigh as much as when it was originally put down there? It's called decomposition, and that is normal what happens with an apple. It breaks down and then it weighs less. So if you said that in an autopsy about the apple, that it now weighs less, is the autopsy wrong, or do you have like a logic failure? Huh? It's back to this thing. It's not denial, it's just very selective about the reality I accept, right? Okay, yeah, that's also a possibility we don't really want to even think about or talk about, but it is. You know, in the footage of AWP, you actually see, I think, 2 fish swimming around that area. What do you think they were doing there? You also get other freshwater organisms like crabs. Checker TV could tell you more about that because he was diving in there all the time, but it's a freshwater lake, and I think, don't people fish in it? I mean, aren't there fish in the Prosser Lake? Yeah. Tina says, I give you so much credit for trying to cut through. Yeah, thanks a lot. May says, are we asking incompetency still? It's the only true crime here on Ali's part for, I'm not quite sure what you're saying. Team incompetence. There, good. So harsh reality says, what's the weight disparity, and consider whether the weight difference makes sense. That's the one and only question you're going to have. Out you go. he also thinks I haven't looked at some of his videos and gotten the subtext from them. So, as I say, I wasn't born yesterday. So shooting the messenger doesn't suddenly make it foul play. Shooting the writers of the autopsy doesn't suddenly make it, oh, there's a discrepancy with the weight, so now it's foul play. It's just arguing the case in a way that fits an agenda. Criticize by all means, but what is your solution? So if you say the weight's different, okay, so what is that supposed to be telling you? What is your synthesis for what actually happened if you don't agree with the reports? That then brings us to the third point that is, I think, valid, criticism that's valid. Now, you may be noticing I'm acknowledging the valid criticism, but then I'm also providing a different side to it. I'm also saying, yeah, but there's another aspect to address as well, right? So let's go to number 3. One of the points the expert made was whether there was blunt force trauma to the brain. This is the expert that hadn't read the full autopsy. And he said this could be a sign of foul play, and that's a really good point. You would want to look for evidence of foul play in the autopsy. And so it could be a sign of foul play, but it could also be a sign of banging your head against a steering wheel or a windscreen. So you see, once again, there's that sort of sense of look at more other cases and gather statistics. Thanks, May. I actually have done that. I don't know if you've watched any of my videos where I gather statistics. Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that. Okay, so I've done that. I've been in an accident where I've broken the windscreen. I've had to take glass out of my head. I was in an accident where the driver, I wasn't driving, the driver bent the steering wheel, right? So blunt force trauma is common in murder, but it's also very common in car accidents. So that's the thing that, again, is you saying, I'm looking for foul play, so I'm looking for blunt force trauma. But then you don't say, oh, but there could actually be blunt force trauma in a car accident. Again, it's flippin' selective thinking. It's flippin' selective thinking. Okay. I've also sliced open my knee in a car accident, and that wasn't because somebody attacked me. It was because I was in a car accident. So I had a cutting wound, and the bottom line is there was no blunt force trauma in the Rodney case. So just bringing that up was actually kind of reckless and wrong. So let's have a discussion about blunt force trauma as a sign of foul play. Actually, if you've read the autopsy, you know that you shouldn't even be having that discussion because it's not there. You're making content and you're putting up discussion about something that's not evidence. Yeah, it is exasperating. Cover Up says, why not a test for fentanyl? That's quite a good question. My answer to that is there could be 2 possible reasons. The one is that they may have spoken to the teenagers at length and they may have said, no, we didn't actually use fentanyl, right? That's one possibility. The other one is fentanyl has a very short half-life, and I would imagine, and I think it's also, I could be wrong on this, I think it's also soluble in water, right? Thanks a lot, Margaret. So fentanyl has a very short half-life. So, and I think that's why it's such a popular drug, is that you can take it, but the evidence of it goes completely out of your body really, really quickly. So it's very difficult. There's some drugs that are quite difficult to test. Fentanyl is one of them. So that, I think, would be the answer to that. Stephanie is a pharmacist. Stephanie, what do you say about what I've just said about fentanyl? Is it true that it has a short half-life, meaning it's absorbed by the body and it's totally flushed out by the body within a very short time, at like half a day or not very long. I just want to see what Stephanie says in response. Stephanie is a pharmacist, so she can speak quite authoritatively about that. What's interesting in the Chris Watts case was Chris Watts admitted to poisoning Shanann with fentanyl, with oxy, and he basically said that that's why it was in the medical examiner's report, because I put it there. But then it never appeared in the medical examiner's report, and that's why you wonder, was that restricted because of health legislation? But there's an example of what appears to be something not in the autopsy report. Les Brown says, it's highly likely that they scan for a wide variety of drugs, including fentanyl. It's just not mentioned as one of the drugs tested. From what I could see, I know they tested for cocaine. Let me actually check that. I've got the autopsy report here. Toxicology. So it certainly doesn't come up as positive finding. It's not one of those. Just want to see if they did test for that. I don't remember seeing it. Acetone, ethanol, cannabinoids, opiates. Oh, they did. Actually, they did test for it. Oxycodone is right there. So they did test for it. There it is. They did test for fentanyl. Fentanyl is oxycodone. That's another word for it. Let me confirm that. They're basically interchangeable. They're similar, but fentanyl is 100 times more potent than morphine. Is fentanyl a strong opioid? There you go. Just trying to see whether, there you go. Fentanyl is much stronger than oxycodone and many other opioids. So it's a kind of opioid, as I understand it. What is the difference between oxycodone and fentanyl? They do belong to the same general class of drugs, opioid medication. So fentanyl and oxycodone are from kind of the same class, right? That's how I understood it. Let's just see what Stephanie says about this. It's much stronger, but fentanyl and oxy are kind of from a similar family, is my point. In other words, they did when they tested for oxycodone, they're testing for fentanyl, as I understand it. There's the test for cocaine. So sometimes it's just really a weakness in not reading the autopsy completely. I mean, I don't know if I saw that. I definitely saw that, cocaine. But the point is what they found, not what they didn't find. The point is that there were positives for these. And as I say, it makes me quite angry when they say, oh, so she wasn't intoxicated. Well, these were positive for ethanol, that's alcohol, nicotine, that's possibly from, what did Mag say? Vaping, what did she say? 5 guys approached her that wanted to, what was it? I'm just trying to find exactly what she said. Can you guys remember what Mag said about the guys approaching her with something? Can you remember that? Can't seem to find it. Can't seem to find it here. Bong rips, that's it. Sorry, I'm not a druggie, so I'm not really, not a druggie, but I'm not someone who uses recreational things. So it's kind of parlance that I'm unfamiliar with. Okay, but the point is that this is what they did find. These are positive findings. So anyone who tells you she wasn't intoxicated, this shows that there was signs of potential intoxication. So it's not one way or the other. There's not proof that she was very intoxicated, and there's not proof that she was totally sober either. It's a little bit murky, and part of the problem is because they tested liver tissue and not vitreous humor, and it was a little bit unsophisticated in my opinion, which I think is a bit of a weakness in the autopsy. Okay, so you have a valid argument about something that isn't even present. That's in terms of the blunt force trauma. If there's blunt force trauma in the autopsy, then that could be a sign of foul play. True, but there's not blunt force trauma in the autopsy. So you've just made a valid argument about something that's like a straw man, right? Okay. I find it interesting that just as with AWP, the argument now isn't so much about disputing the new information. It's about arguing that there must be some additional information out there that is being held back, that there's some sort of cover-up. What true crime should be is about analyzing what we know, not always reaching into the unknown and speculating what might be there, right? And that is what this channel also did. They didn't really concentrate, to my money, on what was in the autopsy, saying, well, that isn't there and that is there. In other words, it looks like there was some sign of intoxication and there wasn't blunt force trauma. Instead of emphasizing that, they keep kind of going, but what's missing? This is an error in the discrepancies. Maybe we can have a completely new autopsy done because I don't agree with this one. So I'm going to completely invalidate and dismiss this autopsy because it's not saying what I want to hear. Is that the way to do things? Rousey says, I cannot emphasize enough that fentanyl and oxycodone are two very different drugs. And outpatient fentanyl comes in the form of, okay. So if you take that and you apply that here, you say, okay, so these are totally, totally different drugs. Okay, but neither of them appeared in the autopsy. That's the bottom line. So you can do the same and say, Nick, you do not know what you're talking about. They are totally, totally different drugs. Okay, but in terms of the autopsy and in terms of our investigation, is it relevant? Answer, no. That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line, not, oh, okay, well, you don't know what you're talking about because of that and that and that. No, no, no. In terms of the autopsy and the greater argument here, is it foul play? That's not part of the thing. So I don't really get the argument, really. So let me just bring that up again. What true crime should be is about analyzing what we know, not always reaching into the unknown and speculating what might be there. Let's take the autopsy and look at what is said there that we know. So what do they say that we can use? Well, how about the where is it? How about this? Positive findings. How about beginning the conversation with that the alcohol was ethanol alcohol, that the ethanol was above the normal limit, not a lot above, but above. How about the fact that these things were present? How about the fact that alcohol and recreational drugs were mixed? And that's a part that was definitely missing from the autopsy, showing that the one can enhance the effect of the other by having them together. By having that sort of polypharmacy, you have a polypharmacy effect. The one enhances the other. The one with the other present makes the disorientation greater, makes the sense of intoxication greater. And there is actually a difference between if you have the one first and the other one second, compared to if you have the other one first and the other one second. Talking about mixing marijuana with alcohol, there is a impact to which one you take first and which one you take second, right? Yeah, and nicotine, yeah. Definitely. But the fact that they're combined is another aspect that I don't hear anybody talking about. Everyone wants to minimize that and say, oh, so she wasn't intoxicated. Actually, it looks like she may have been. And actually, if you combine those effects, you get a sense of she may have been to quite a large extent. Thanks for that, Stargirl. Okay, I need to wrap up. I think I've got 20 minutes. So, as I said, it feels like if you don't get the answer you want, where is that now? If you don't get the answer you want, there's got to be some unknown missing piece. But once we've got that piece, all will be revealed about foul play, and Kylie's murderer will suddenly become crystal clear. Isn't that what you're arguing for? Foul play, well, there must be a murderer out there. Well, who is he? And that brings us to number 4. That's definitely something that I agree with you, May. I feel like I've not agreed with a lot of what you said, but that I do agree with. Where is it now? There it is. I'm glad about that because I'm starting to get worried. If I disagree over and over again with someone, I start to worry. Are you here to disagree, or are you here to have a conversation? Does anything that I say make an impression? Is anything that I say valid? If you disagree with everything, it starts to feel like it's not genuine. So number 4, although the alley host couldn't recall the name of the fluid in the eye, that's the vitreous humor, that is a test that ought to have been conducted in this case. So again, I'm talking a little bit about if you are dealing with the autopsy in the Kylie Rodney case, and vitreous humor, the name of that escapes your mind. Have you what's the word? Have you researched this case sufficiently? Have you prepared? Have you prepped? Have you kind of done background reading, right? Because you should have, because one of the key areas you need to go into with a drowning victim, someone who's been in water for an extended period, and the thing that you want to test for is the alcohol at the time of death, right? That's different to the alcohol, the natural alcohol, right? The ethanol. And so if you can't think of the word vitreous humor, it makes you wonder, have you been kind of studying up on this case? Because you should know it, right? How come I knew it? How come I did a live a very long time ago where I talked about reality shifts and I used cases, and I specifically referred to research that showed drowning victims in water for 2 weeks and a month, where they said how you could get quite accurate results as if you looked at the vitreous humor. And you could rightfully say, you're an idiot that knows nothing about true crime. You're a South African, you don't even know about America. You've got nothing of value to say. We law enforcement, we've been in the business, we worked in a lab. Yeah, but you can't remember vitreous humor. So I'm just kind of asking a question about expertise then, because that's part of the autopsy, right? That's part of the autopsy, and it's an important part of the autopsy. It's important to know the terminology, right? Karina says, could the eyes have been compromised by aquatic life? I did deal with that. I did deal with that in a previous episode, where if you look at the autopsy, it talks about the conjunctiva that is intact, and it also talks about the eye color. It talks about the eye color changing, but you would think that the autopsy would mention that has been impacted. Without actually seeing the autopsy photos, it's hard to know for sure, but you would imagine that they would say so if that was the case. So TLO says, if it's foul play, it's not necessarily a murder, but it could be negligent friends. Yeah, but negligent friends isn't foul play. If you buy someone a drink and they go on and die in a car accident, it doesn't mean that you should be charged for murder. What I'm going to tell you guys is a fact. I walked my dog yesterday, and I walked by a vehicle that was parked outside a pub, and the vehicle had a flat tire. And I sort of made quite a big circuit, and I didn't really feel like socializing, didn't really feel like, because I had to go into the middle of this party of people I didn't really know. I didn't really feel like it, but I also thought with the Kylie Rodney case on my mind, I thought I should probably let these people know that there's a flat tire while there's still a little bit of light, because once the sun goes down, you may not, and you've had a couple of drinks, you may not know you've got a flat tire, and then you could have an accident. So I went into this group and I asked them, is there anyone here with happened to be a silver Hyundai? Does anyone have a silver Hyundai with this license plate number? Someone put up their hand. I said, sorry, you got a flat tire, right? If I didn't tell them, would that make me responsible that somebody died? Should I be arrested? I should tell them, but if I didn't, would it be my fault? Wouldn't be very nice, but would that be foul play? Bartenders and bars can and are charged for exactly that in the USA. Okay. But we weren't in a bar. Are seniors routinely charged for, let me put it this way, when there's a car accident, are people who saw those people routinely charged for something? Okay, number 5. So the host asked, could they have left some of the things out of the report? I would think it would be full disclosure, right? So again, it's that thing. Look at the image next to me. This is asked by the host. It's verbatim. Could they have left some of the things out of the report? I would think it would be full disclosure, right? Well, it's a valid point that certain things may be left out, but not because of foul play conspiracies. In the Chris Watts case, there was a 26-page autopsy and toxicology report. And one aspect that I believe may have been missing, I said this before, I said this a little bit earlier, was the medical examiner finding oxy in Shanann's remains. In Shanann's case, she had what appeared to be high blood alcohol, BAC level, and then this led to a secondary investigation to disprove this. And they did. They found that high blood alcohol level was actually natural alcohol. It conformed to ethanol naturally, what's the word? Not germinating. Yeah, I can't think of the right word. It's a good word, but it's basically increasing the way that bacteria naturally increases. E. Caroline says they would leave nothing out. That's a big assumption that they would leave nothing out, because there are reasons why they could or should, and I'm about to give you one. So in the Chris Watts case, where you needed a secondary investigation to determine whether the apparently elevated blood alcohol was unnatural, they had an investigation to determine that. I think the blood alcohol level was 118, and I don't know if it's the same, if you can compare that with Kylie Rodney, hers being 88. I don't know if you can compare them in that way. But and I mean the other things that are different. The one body's in water. The water is a lower temperature than a body buried in Colorado in summer in the soil. Anyway, but if you think, shouldn't it have been necessary to have a secondary investigation in the Rodney case to prove the same thing, to prove or to disprove that she'd been drinking? And I think the answer is maybe that was necessary, and probably that was necessary. But if there was, it would not be in the public interest, perhaps in social media's interest, but not in the genuine public interest to disclose that. Because if Ali didn't feel there were grounds for criminal charges based on teenagers drinking and doing drugs, we know that that's how they felt during all those press conferences prior to the discovery of the body. If we know that they didn't feel there's grounds for criminal charges for drinking and doing drugs, social media in their high and mighty wisdom may decide otherwise. They may decide, well, were you doing that substance? What's your name? You need to be prosecuted. Because I never did that when I was a teenager. I never did drugs, and I never gave drugs to anyone else. So you need to be prosecuted or fined and vilified in the court of public opinion. Why? Because I can make a lot of money out of that, and that's what this case is all about. But law enforcement might say, we don't actually want that. And Kylie's mother might say, we don't really want that. And the Truckee Tahoe community, or Tahoe community, might also say, we don't really want that. And if it was your daughter that was at a party where something like that happened, you might not also want her name to be part of this, because she's not guilty of something that anyone else isn't guilty of. But you in social media might say, no, you're definitely guilty, and we need your name. We need to slaughter you in the court of public opinion, because I never did that when I was young, but the fact that you did, we need to go after you. So in their high and mighty wisdom, social media may decide otherwise, but it still wouldn't make social media right, prognosticating as some sort of moral authority from its high Trojan horse. And now let's deal with autopsy criticism that's not valid. That's, again, just my opinion. Okay, so that's what we're going to deal with now. Mods, just take note of comments like this that have got these big all caps. You know, we really don't like it on this channel, and please, tell people that. I really don't like seeing it. It's usually a sign that someone's unhinged and angry and got a bone to pick with someone. It's not a sign that someone's having a sort of intelligent debate with you. We really don't like to see that. This is different because it's a heading, right? That's a heading. It's not, I'm not shouting at somebody. What is, yeah, please bear that in mind. Like if you don't know this one now, wow. Lunchman says the parents don't get to decide that in the USA. It is the state versus John or Jane Doe when charges come out. That's where you're wrong, Lunchman. That's where you're wrong. The thing that I think you're missing here is that there's a minor in this story. I think you're missing that part. A minor is someone who's not yet reached 18 years of old, and minors need to be protected. And there were minors besides Kylie, and even if you say no one was a minor, well, there were young people there. Young people need to be protected. If you didn't see my video that I put up earlier today, it was about a young person that felt overwhelmed, attacked, things taken out of context. Someone like her needs to be protected. If you didn't see that, maybe you should start paying attention. Seriously. Seriously. Okay, so off you go. Off you go. And you say that I'm not open to another opinion. Okay, so the first thing and that's exactly it. The first thing that the criticism is not valid. What seems to be missed time and time again is that Kylie is different to many individuals we tend to cover in high-profile cases. She's a minor. Have you kind of gotten that information, like, has it gotten into your head that Kylie was 16 years old, not like you, 16 years old, right? She's a minor. Has that information gotten in there? It doesn't seem like it has. So there's a situation, and in the John Benet Ramsey case, you had someone else who was quite young. And so as a result, certain things are legally acknowledged and certain things aren't because of the legal things surrounding certain people. Are you aware of that, or you're not aware of that? So when you have certain people of a certain age, unlike adults, they get additional protections, including protections of privacy. You also have something like that when there are health issues that are protected by health legislation. Are you aware of that or not? So, in fact, Kylie was on the boundary line between a child and an adult. And I think that just that on its own, this idea that she's a minor, but she's kind of not a child anymore. She's a minor, but she's not a child, but she's also not an adult. She's on this boundary line between being a child and an adult. And can I ask you a question? Were you ever on that boundary line? Were you ever a child that became an adult? Were you ever a child who did certain things that were wise and clever, but also did some things that weren't very wise and clever? Did you ever make mistakes? I don't know if you are aware of this, but some young people transition between being a child and an adult, and they make mistakes. They don't do things that are totally rational. In fact, part of the point of going from being young to being older is to make mistakes, to act crazy, to get drunk, to make a fool of yourself. It's all part of the whole thing, right? But maybe you've never done that in your life. I have. So that is part of, I think, the big reason for her becoming more intoxicated than everyone else. So if you can just take that step. So if you have been struggling with this issue here, I'm not in denial, I'm just selective about reality. So if you do somehow like come to the point where you say, I'm actually going to think a little bit about the fact that she was quite young. She was 16. And that doesn't just mean a number. It actually means, what was I like when I was 16? Was I very mature? Was I very shy? Was I very good at drinking alcohol? What kind of driver was I when I was 16 years old? What kind of parties did I go to when I was 16 years old? And all those questions, if you think about them, it'll give you a little bit of insight into the story that you might be getting for the very, very first time. Unless you want to continue to be selective about reality. So in other words, a big key to understanding this case is putting yourselves in the shoes of a 16-year-old. And one of the ways to do that is put yourself back into your own shoes when you were 16 years old. What kind of driver were you? What kind of drinker were you? What were you like with the opposite sex? What was your approach to recreational substances? When was the first time you got drunk? When you got drunk, what happened? Should someone else be blamed for the first time that you got drunk? Should someone else go to jail when you pleaded for whatever substance that you wanted, or try to influence someone else on a substance? Should you go to jail for that? Should we go back in time and look at what you did? Should we get the information on Facebook or otherwise for what you were doing at that time? What does that feel like when people do that? It's a bit of an invasion of privacy, isn't it? So the fact that there was this boundary line between being a child and an adult is a big reason for becoming more intoxicated than everyone else, I think, and driving into the reservoir unlike anyone else. Why did she get more intoxicated, and why did she drive into the reservoir unlike anyone else? Because she was younger. Now you might say, I don't think she was intoxicated and I don't think she drove into the reservoir. Great, then what's your explanation for what happened? Come up with one. Come up with one that actually makes sense. Where's your suspect? Where's your substance? Come up with that. Failing that, all you can do is mock what you cannot make, right? So what we're talking about here is inexperience, right? Inexperience. And ironically, the same inexperience that got Kylie into trouble has gotten social media into trouble, has gotten fake crime into trouble. People inexperienced with investigations, inexperienced with proper critical thinking, right? Error. It's youth overestimating its capacities, not just Kylie, but those around her as well. Have you ever done that? Is it so rare? It's so rare that a young person makes a mistake. Is it so rare that someone who's under the influence and driving makes a mistake? That's never happened. Anyone in the USA under the age of 18 is a minor. And besides that, there were hundreds of people at a party that deserve privacy and protection. You may not think so. I do, and other people do. You may not think they deserve any leniency or any respect or any credit. I do, and other people do. If you don't, that's you. And maybe you kind of a foul play. Maybe the whole thing about foul play shows that you've got a foul mind. And the same channel that is talking about when you investigate a case, whenever someone dies, you must immediately assume that it was foul play. Really? My mother committed suicide. Must I go and investigate that as did a family member murder my mother? So every single time somebody dies, you must assume that it's foul play. Really? I almost died in a car accident last Sunday, a week ago today. I must say I would really resent it if my death was sketched as either that I committed suicide or someone murdered me. Maybe I deserved it or whatever. I had it coming. Instead of that, I died in an accident, and let's talk about how people drive and how people, and that was also a drunk driving scenario. I would hate my story to be appropriated by someone who's got the foul play hat on and everything they see is a nail. I'm in true crime and I'm going to see everything as a conspiracy. That's going to be my first port of call. Not, I actually thought, like I've studied many, many cases. I thought the first thing that law enforcement was supposed to do is follow the evidence. Am I crazy? I thought the first thing law enforcement did was you let the evidence take you to wherever it's going to take you, right? You don't make up your mind before you've even looked at the evidence that it's foul play. You let the evidence guide you, and if you don't, you can lose your case, as happened in the O.J. Simpson case and also happened in the Casey Anthony case, where law enforcement are accused of a rush to judgment because right in the beginning they cuff somebody. So actually, the right way to go about things is to actually suspend your judgment, right? That's actually the right way for law enforcement to operate. And it seems like some people in law enforcement don't know that. You can get into legal trouble if it turns out that you rushed to judgment, that you started along a path because of your bias right in the beginning. In other words, you didn't actually allow a certain minimum time where you allow the evidence to guide you to a particular reality. So if they show that bias in true crime, in in a court case, you can lose your case. I wouldn't be surprised if that's why Adnan Syed got out of jail, because it seemed like there was bias there. It's a big thing. It's a big thing that causes prosecutions to be unsuccessful. And it's a big thing that causes true crime to do what it's just done. What's wrong with being patient? Well, it's the rush to bring out content before anyone else. In that rush, you might make a mistake. Okay, so Kylie was a minor, and it's possible not only her mother and her parents, but also law enforcement would want to protect the community from further harm. For example, if it turned out Kylie was highly intoxicated and she then drove herself into the reservoir, would it behove the authorities to launch an investigation into who was drinking and then arrest various individuals for vehicular manslaughter? Social media, everyone together now say, yes, that's what we want. Identify these evil teenagers, line them up, and let's go after them. The problem is there's no intent to do harm. The problem is at that seniors party, no one had horns coming out of their heads where they thought, I would like Kylie to die. I would like Kylie to be hurt. I would like Kylie to be injured. And you guys that believe that should be ashamed of yourselves, because that's what you think. That's not what they thought. There's no evidence of that, but that's what you think. There's no evidence of that even in the autopsy. There's no evidence that she's injured. She landed in water, and so there's no actual injury to her body, internal or external. That's still not good enough for you. Oh, maybe something's missing. So if there's no intent to harm, the problem is that there's no intent to harm, and also it ignores Kylie's own agency. So you want to make someone else have the agency that hurt Kylie and it's all their fault. And at the same time, you want to take away Kylie's agency. If you remember what her mother said at the celebration, you got a sense of a very independent spirit, a very intelligent girl, a very strong individual, an individual that had a sense of herself. You want to take that away and make someone else responsible for what happened to her. I would love to see that argument in your own life when you were 16 years old. Please, I don't have any agency over my life. I'm 16 years old. Can you tell me what to do? Can you tell me what I can drink? Can you tell me when I can drive? Because I don't have any agency. Yet you are arguing for that in Kylie's life. So let me say that again. She was an intelligent teenager. One imagines that stands for something, but obviously anyone who's under the influence is not intelligent. So shouldn't someone else have saved her and intervened? But they are under the influence also. Do you get that? They are also under the influence. Number two, glossing over body position. So the fact that the former LE channel literally read through the body position paragraph, this blew my mind. This blew my mind. The guy reading this basically just read through it almost in one breath and kept going. To me, the fact that he didn't stop and go, oh, well, this means this means that. Aren't you going to analyze this part? Body position is such a crucial part of any true crime investigation. Body position is a huge part of, think about so many cases, the John Benet Ramsey case, Meredith Kircher, just so many cases. Shanann Watts, the body position there. I don't know, just so many cases where you say the body position, the body is sometimes your best evidence for what happened to someone. And you're not going to really even pause and talk about that. the body, the actually finding the body is like the final missing puzzle piece in many investigations. It tells you that certain things didn't happen, that certain things did, but also the body position is giving you an idea of the final, the way that the chips finally fell. Really, you're not going to pause and talk about that. Are you kidding me? So anyway, this is my assessment of that. So it's this part here, body position. The big bullet in the foul theory gun, if not the biggest bullet in the foul theory gun, was the apparent mystery surrounding how Kylie ended up in the rear hatch area. In other words, body position. So here is body position, and we've made our biggest case that where Kylie's body position was is why it's foul play, right? But now we're not even going to talk about it when we deal with the autopsy, because that's not really suiting our reality. It's not, this isn't what we expected. So all the mystery surrounding how Kylie ended up in the rear hatch area, along with the intrigue that she'd been tied down or strapped down, that's not mentioned at all, unless I missed it. All I saw was it being read out from beginning to end and then going on to the next section. So if it was a factor, if she was tied down, it would have been mentioned, but it's not mentioned. Is that what's missing from the autopsy? There's no reason why they wouldn't mention that if it was happening. It would also be part of the lividity. If she was tied down, you would see bands of lividity and you would see discoloration where she was artificially held up against flotation or against gravity. There's no sign of that anywhere. So in other words, she wasn't tied down. Have you heard any of the channels, the foul play channels, acknowledging that? She wasn't tied down. And yet that was central to the foul play narrative. She was tied down, therefore it's foul play. She wasn't tied down, therefore what? Let's find something else to make it foul play. If you insist, it's not denial, it's just being selective about reality. No, it's not denial, it's not denial. So if you complain that the body moved after the vehicle was turned around, and that was a complaint, underwater, then how could it have been tied down as well? The body moved, and so when it turned around, yeah, but if it was tied down, it couldn't have moved. So that's a mutually destructive argument. The other part you notice is that one of Kylie's legs appears not only to be floating freely, but even though the car is right side up, it's elevated, the leg is elevated to pillar seat level. That doesn't sound like the body's entirely hidden or buried or tied up into a hatch. Conveniently, the former Ali sidestepped this entire area completely. Because if you didn't sidestep it, how the heck would you explain it? If you didn't sidestep this, how would you explain it? Yeah, that's right, Mike. And fully clothed. Yeah, that's the other one. I don't know if that particular channel mentioned, oh, it says that she was wearing clothing. Oh. Selective about reality. That's why this case has gone the way that it's gone, being very selective about reality. So I've got two more to go through, and then I must really jump off. The other one is ethanol was positive. That's all that he said. Again, I may have missed something. Maybe he came back to it, but he basically said ethanol was positive, and ethanol was positive. Oh, so there may have been intoxication. Maybe she did drive drunk and was disorientated and was an accident. Oh no, just ethanol was positive. Let's go on to the next thing. And then I think at this point they said, obviously we're going to do part 2 to this. Yeah, because it's not as incredibly simple, is it? Also, you may think you're experts in toxicology, but I think no one is. Like you may maybe think you're an expert in blood alcohol levels and polypharmacy, but really no one is. It is a very niche science, and it's very, very complicated. It's a very understudied area. So anyone who says, well, I know what this means, well, okay, well, then you need the Nobel Peace Prize for chemistry. Then there was a read-through of the just saying that it's accidental. Also, no pausing there. No pausing to say, could it be accidental? This report says it's accidental. Yeah, but it's not what I want to hear. So we're not going to pause on that, and we're not even going to think about it. How could it have been an accident? We're not going to do that, though. So that's regarding this. Case disposition, closed, accident. We're not going to really talk about why they could have come to that conclusion, because it disagrees with what we've said. I think we're only going to highlight the stuff we agree with, and all the stuff we won't highlight. That's not true crime. That's not analysis. You look at both sides, like I've just done here. You look at the sides that support your theory, and you look at the sides that don't. You argue the evidence both ways. Who does that? Who does that? And then the fifth and final one, the analysis is incomplete. So even in the analysis of the autopsy, they don't actually complete it. It doesn't even reach this page, and I think it's this page. And again, I may have missed something, but that's to do with the clothing, that she was actually fully clothed. And it doesn't reach this page either. And you can see there's a heck of a lot of text here. Unless I missed it. Maybe it did reach it and I just missed it. But it doesn't reach this page. There's no apparent head trauma. There is no sign of SA, etc. Right? Just doesn't, the analysis doesn't reach that point. Don't worry, we'll get to it at another point, at another time. What this confirms is that Kylie was found in the clothing she attended during the party. What happened to tow truck guy? What happened to okay. Her belt is on, it's buckled, and there's no sign of SA. Wouldn't you want to acknowledge that? Isn't that quite an important point, that there's no sign of SA? SA is foul play. There's no sign of SA. Maybe you should mention that. So why wouldn't you acknowledge that a primary reason for foul play, SA, can now be excluded? Why wouldn't you say that? Instead, you say, what is missing from the autopsy report? Not what's in the autopsy report. What's missing? Maybe there's something missing. I think we should maybe get a second autopsy report. Oh, but we can't because she was cremated. Maybe that's a sign of foul play. It's the same thing of counterfeiting the narrative that AWP did. AWP said at some point, I don't have the exact link here, but they said something like, if law enforcement say that it was an accident, who's going to believe them? Or would you believe them, right? You're counterfeiting the narrative before it even comes out. This other channel is doing exactly the same thing, saying, we haven't really read the autopsy, but if we do, maybe we should actually have a second autopsy report before we do. But we can't because she's been cremated. You're counterfeiting the narrative even before you've dealt with it. Is that true crime? Is that true crime analysis? Yeah, that is what it is. Jay says it can't be proven that she was intoxicated or not. It can be proven, it can be shown that there were substances that are typically associated with intoxication in her system, right? You can't prove that she was intoxicated or that she was extremely intoxicated, but you can prove that or you can show that there were substances in her system. So the argument that there was no sign or she wasn't drunk, that is an absolute statement that is not, that you can't make. You can't make that one. Kathy, thanks a lot for that. I really need to wrap up. I'm 20 minutes late for my other appointment. I'm almost done. Okay, so if we apply the same, someone else knows something and is responsible. Just think about that, right? There's a teenager out there, one of the 300 or 400 that knows something and is responsible for this. If we apply that to the Yolisa Fuentes case, to the Anne Hesh incident, to the Windsor Hills crash, to the Uber couple crash, where does the buck stop if not with the driver? Someone else is responsible, not the person behind the wheel, right? Where does the buck stop if not with the driver? Someone's driving a vehicle, they go off the road, they crash, they die. Who do you want to blame? The manufacturer of the vehicle, the manufacturer of the tires, the drink that they were drinking. In the same way, YouTubers want to avoid blaming Kylie for having some responsibility. Like, does she have any responsibility as a 16-year-old? Well, her mother thought she had some, that she had some agency in her own actions. They seem to want, I'm saying YouTubers want to avoid the same. YouTubers also want to avoid taking responsibility themselves, right? There's always some additional missing link, some additional unknown entity that must be responsible. No, there isn't. Because the body has been cremated, an independent pathologist cannot perform a second autopsy. That's not strictly speaking true. So once again, if you don't know your subject matter that well, you wouldn't know this. You can actually get a second opinion when you don't have access to the remains. And you know how you do that. You have a pathologist go through the autopsy report. And that is exactly what this channel is hoping to do. The channel is hoping to get another expert and say, can you look at this report and what do you see that is coherent or incoherent? What do you see that is cohesive or incohesive? What do you see that fits or doesn't fit in terms of this report? And I'll be quite surprised if the expert is as critical as they have been, right? I would be quite surprised if this expert that is obviously a friend of theirs isn't more nuanced in her opinion. We'll see. Les says, thanks for the resolute support of critical thinking. Thanks a lot for that. Paddy says, do people grow 2 inches during decomposition? Does that kind of thinking get you to stay in the foul play thing? I think the answer is yes. So keep asking that question. And I'm sure you do. I'm sure you've got that question like on copy and paste. I'm sure you do. So you can actually, even if someone's been cremated or buried, like in a John Benet Ramsey case, that's a case that really gives you a lot of fuel and information to understand the intrigue of a lot of other cases. It really is a good learning ground, right? And I've written about 12, 13 books on the John Benet Ramsey case. I really dug deeply into that case. So you can imagine I looked at the autopsy many, many, many times in that case. I looked at other people's version of the autopsy in that case many, many times. And you understand how experts play with certain aspects, but in order to support their case. So you can get a second opinion. We also saw that in a South African case, the Roder case, where they had, I think, a total of 4 pathologists. There were 2 on both sides that were arguing the case. And one of the arguments was, yeah, but you didn't see the actual body, or you saw it 5 days after that pathologist, or you based your findings on reading the report, didn't you? But nevertheless, you can argue legal merits without having actual access to the remains. It seems like, I don't know if these former Ali folks know that. Just because the body was cremated doesn't mean you can't still investigate the autopsy and assess it and think critically about it. So this whole notion of, oh, all is lost, there's no way we can ever know, it's not true. It's an impression. It's something that's being suggested to you that's not actually true. You can look at an autopsy and you can have another expert look at it and make an assessment. Obviously, it's ideal. It's more ideal to look at the original remains. That is preferred, definitely. So in the John Benet Ramsey case, you did actually have other pathologists look at the autopsy report and come to sometimes a different conclusion, certainly in terms of whether she had vaginitis or whether there was something else going on. The other point to consider is, and that's the last thing I'm going to say, while you can argue the body was cremated to cover something up, you'd imagine the people who would be most concerned about whether there was foul play or not would be the family. If Kylie was murdered and there was some reason to believe that, you'd think the people who would most care about, we want justice for Kylie, would be her family. Yet social media conveniently pushed that aside. No, we care about Kylie more than her mother. No, we care about and know more about Kylie than her best friends and her closest friends. No, we as social media are pure of heart, and we really here because we genuinely care about Kylie, although we don't really care about anyone else. We don't really care about her friends because we want to do witch hunts after them. We don't really care if the speculation is harmful, but we are genuinely caring. Also, if we admitted it, we care about ourselves a lot. That's why our faces are on every single YouTube cover that we do. You see our faces, and we are very much part of the story. So, yeah, we care a lot about Kylie, but we also care a heck of a lot about ourselves, don't we? And in caring about yourself so much, do you care about the evidence so much? Are you able to put the background a bit so that you're not in denial and it's not about you, it's actually about the evidence? Can you do that? Even when the outcome doesn't suit you. So I'm going to say something that some of you here who don't know me won't like. The outcome in the Deb versus Heard case definitely didn't suit me, but it was the outcome that I believed to be true. And if I really loved myself and I loved money and I loved my channel and I loved being popular, I wouldn't have taken that route, the one that I believed to be true. If I loved myself so much and I loved myself more than I loved truth, then I would have said something that I didn't really believe, or I would have put myself first, but I actually put what I believe is justice first. And it cost me. My channel really struggled through this year. Paddy says, going back to rewatch Team Peachtree, definitely. So can you see in the image behind me, there's a tree and there's Kylie and there's sort of some color in between that. What has been the epitome of this case is people not being able to see the woods. That's the whole picture for the trees. And you see the same thing with the autopsy. The autopsy says she died by accident. There were a lot of reasons why they said that, but people want to get lost in the trees intentionally. They want to get lost in the trees so that they can say the woods are something else. It's not a pine forest, it's a palm forest. No, actually it is pine trees. Actually, that is what it is. Actually, there's a very simple explanation for the accident theory, that she took a wrong turn late at night when she was tired. Actually, there's a very complicated, convoluted, muddy, murky, uncertain, neither here nor there theory that never really goes anywhere. It just goes, yes, but, or maybe this, or what about that? But it never really goes anywhere. It's sort of just endlessly going down rabbit holes. There's not a simple explanation or even a concise explanation or even one specific theory. It's just, it's suspicious. Whereas the accident theory's got a very simple explanation. And I get it. It's too simple for many people. It's also too banal for a lot of people. And I get it's not exciting enough for YouTube. It's not the kind of story that's going to make you money and subscribers. But true crime shouldn't be about making money or subscribers. It should be about the truth. And this is, for once, a true crime case. It's actually not about true crime. It's about an accident. But true crime has a hammer, and it wants to see everything as a nail. So that's what it's done. Hence, that. Being very selective about reality. And it's not a nice place to be. It's not a nice thing to admit that you can't see things for what they are. So you'd rather not admit it. You also don't like somebody else saying that. So let's make them the enemy. Let's blame them and let's go after them, because the alternative is not very fun. So you would think that her family, if there was any reason to believe in foul play, you'd imagine the family would be beating on that drum, but they aren't. Have you noticed that they aren't? And this is the bottom line. As dull and stupid as it sounds, statistically, teenagers on weekends in August in America die in car accidents all the time while driving under the influence. Jody C., good to see you. You're just in time for me to say goodbye. Sorry about that. I want to also say, just as a final thing, I didn't cover the Stockton serial killer, but I did briefly mention it on Patreon, and I did give my assessment briefly on Patreon, and I kind of based my assessment basically on statistics, and my assessment was basically a profile of the serial killer based on one assessment, and it was based on statistics. And guess what? It turned out to be true. But statistics are so boring. Statistics are so boring. In true crime, logic, common sense, being rational, so boring. Being sensational and witty and entertaining and all the rest. That's the fun part, isn't it? Belonging to a community, that's the important part. And I get that. It is important to want to belong. We feel that. But do you really want to trump the truth because I want to belong and have a warm and fuzzy feeling with a particular channel? What does that say about you in your own home life? Are you also going to be in denial when someone's cheating on you or someone's lying to you, but because you want to belong to them, you just go along with it? It's not going to end very well. Being in denial and having extended holidays from reality, it's not going to end very well. It's going to become a very great threat in your life. Pushing reality aside means that reality gets worse and worse, and your ability to deal with it gets worse and worse. Yeah, it's not a true crime case. It's got many of the defects of true crime, though. Witch hunts, speculation, saying, because I think there's a red flag, I'm qualified to say there's a red flag, so therefore there is a red flag. And so because everyone believes there's a red flag, it's a red flag. And so you make someone's life miserable. I don't think Kylie existed. Oh, well, if enough people say that someone else's life gets totally undermined. That is what my previous video was all about, what it feels like to have all of this fun in speculation land, to have all this fun with fake crime. There's actually a cost to it. There's a cost to the people involved, but there's also a cost to you. You just don't realize what it is. You don't realize when, there's a great lesson to learn out of what happened to Kylie Rodney. One of my best friends sons is about to go to his senior's party, right? And in South Africa, that happens now. And every year, traffic lights, lampposts get flattened this time of the year. Every year, you'll be driving down the road and you'll see a lamppost is totally flattened over here, another one over there, another telephone line or whatever flattened over there, and then you realize, oh, it's the seniors having their various celebrations. It's an absolute cliche. Nobody says that lamppost that got flattened, could it be foul play? Well, let's go and blame the other seniors. Let's by the next time you go to your reunion, try and think about all the drinkers that are there and line them up. How do you think that that's going to go down? Everybody drinks at that time. It's part of like a rite of passage. It's part of a kind of a ritual. But you guys a lot of you guys seem to want to demonize that and turn it into a true crime party. You want to turn a seniors party into a true crime party. It's not. Okay, let's look at some of your comments. Stargold says, the lesson for me, one for all and all for one, take care. Yvette says, example, how many people have gotten out of prison after many, many years? Okay, it's not sure how that's relevant. Deborah says, thanks for your constructive discussion and excellent lateral thinking skills. United we stand. Thanks a lot for that. Yvonne says, the good thing that came out of this case is that Nick was able to teach us more about proper critical thinking. Yeah, I mean, if just my community appreciated why, like, as you can like harp on that, think critically, yeah, so what? So what if you don't? Well, Kylie Rodney is so what if you don't? The Kylie Rodney case beyond Kylie is so what if you don't? Mass delusion, groupthink gone wrong, totally is so what if you don't, you know? Jay says, it still doesn't mean YouTube channels can't speak about it. No, well, they will. And I can tell you, I will probably be speaking about it less because I don't believe I belong in this community. So I will be speaking about this sort of thing less. I've tried to provide a counter narrative, but I see that it doesn't really count. They are going to be more and more unchallenged, and it's not up to, you know, some of my own subscribers and patrons have said, but we need you as a voice of truth. Don't put that on me that I'm what's standing against the tide of all of the stuff that's going on YouTube. I'm not. If I try to hold it back, I wouldn't be able to. It's you. I'm one person. You guys are potentially 92,000 people on that are out there. So you can't expect me, one person, to stand up against the tide, even though I do. It's up to you guys, not as one person, but as collectively, you and somebody else, to do that. You know what to do. I've given you the tools and you've experienced it. It's up to you to have the courage to go out and walk the talk, right? Anyway, I need to disappear. I'm almost 40 minutes late into a members only alternate production. So try and get into that. Navilla says, great job. Great to see someone who values truth and won't lie to subs for views. That's the other thing. Sometimes I put up content, not that often, but I can remember in the Chris Watts case, there was a particular thing, one about a handbag and another one about a co-worker, I think. In this case, there was something about party footage. Sometimes you assume content is true, right? and then you put it up only to find out very shortly afterwards that it probably isn't true. Well, what do you do then? Well, I immediately changed the title and I put something either as a pinned comment or something to say that I've had a change of heart, that I know that this is no longer true. I don't know if I've seen any other channels doing that, saying, oh, so this about being tied in, that's not right. Or, oh, so it's not murder, so I'm going to take that out of my title. That would be conscientious. That would be responsible. And like I said, I like to do that immediately when I know that I've done something that's not helping. It's not strictly speaking true or helping. And often it's those stories that you get wrong that just shoot off in terms of views and subscribers. It's that information you really wish you could get, and then it just falls into your lap, but it turns out it's not true. And that's how the mind works. You want it to be true, so you think it's true, but you're not really thinking it through, are you? Yeah. Okay, so Kathy says, I did see one channel apologize for the initial response. That's good. Terry says, I'd love for us to take a stand and be the conscience for true crime. Yeah, I mean, that would be great if you guys, not just Terry and not just Stephanie, but, you know, like, I don't know, 50 of you or 100 of you or 1,000 of you started being a community that holds fake crime responsible. Not in a nasty way, not in a trolling kind of way, just in a reasonable way. Is that anchored in evidence? How do you support your theory, right? In other words, attack the argument, don't attack the person, don't insult the person. Argue the case, don't argue against the person, right? Okay, I really need to sign off. I'm past 2 hours. Wow. And Uncensored Kelly, she was found in the cargo space. How else could she have drowned accidentally with no foul play? Yeah, I mean, that is it. I mean, where she was following the air pocket, where else did you expect her to be? Stargirl, I feel exactly the same. That's why I want to do more of what I'm about to do. Members only and covering the stuff that I want to cover because it feels pointless. Because we are outnumbered by the mindless mob, the mob that wants the tabloid version of true crime. I'm not interested in that. I'm also not interested in arguing with that because it's wasting my time, right? It really is wasting my time. Okay, Tina says, thanks, Nick and mods. Same from my side. Stephanie, Terry, Yvonne Phillips, Amy Hall, all the members, all the subs, all the super chats, thanks very much. I just want to say I really appreciate my community, the one that's stood by me for so long, the community that's read my books, that are with me on Patreon. You know, you really mean a lot to me. And I actually hope to, I'm on the other side of the world, but I hope to meet you someday. I hope to share an actual rocket launch with you guys, a real moving, meaningful, earth-shaking event. I'm hoping that happens. And I really appreciate the journey that we've had. We've had a journey towards, it feels like enlightenment. And that's worth something. It's definitely worth something, even if others have you know, cauldrons of gold coins that are not the case here. I call that ill-gotten gains, and I'm happy to not be part of that. Thanks a lot, Alan. Okay, I really must be. Sounds good, Stephanie. Sounds good. Okay, guys, I hope you found the analysis here interesting. I hope you found it worthwhile. And I'm definitely going to look at another former Ali channel and look at what they say about the autopsy. I'm really interested to see how that channel handles it. I'm really interested to see. So we'll be looking at that. Thanks, guys. Take care. Stay safe. Think critically. And I'll see you guys next time.